My name is Olivia Brennan, and I'm 34 years old. I built a $22 million tech company from the ground up. No college degree. No family connections. Just an idea and relentless drive. But here's the twist. Despite supporting my parents financially for years, my father still called me a lowlife and cut me out of the family. I'm telling this story from the deck of my beachfront home in Sarasota, Florida, a long way from my roots in Maple Grove, Iowa, where tradition trumped vision and success only counted if it came with a diploma. Growing up, my father, Harold Brennan, was a respected CPA who wore his degree like a badge of honor. My mother, Margaret, was a high school English teacher, equally devoted to the gospel of academia. Their life plan was simple: graduate, get into college, get a job with benefits, and retire after 40 years. But even as a child, I knew I didn't fit their mold. While they dreamed of raising a doctor or lawyer, I was selling friendship bracelets in 4th grade and running a premium lemonade stand by middle school. My creativity was tolerated, not encouraged. That's cute, Mom would say, but it won't pay the bills when you're grown. They weren't wrong, it was cute. But what they didn't realize was that those little ventures weren't just hobbies. They were the seeds of something much bigger. And one day, they'd grow into a company that would challenge everything they believed about success, family, and what it truly means to be enough. By high school, my side hustles had graduated from lemonade and friendship bracelets to something a little more advanced: custom phone cases. Each one designed by hand and sold to classmates who wanted something different from the cookie-cutter options at the mall. I was making enough to buy my first car. No help from anyone. No debt, just profit and drive. But at home, none of it mattered. Every dinner conversation revolved around SAT scores, AP credits, and college rankings. My parents weren't hostile, exactly, just utterly blind to the world I was building outside their expectations. If I dared to talk about my small business or a new product idea, Dad would nod and say, "Interesting, but let's stay focused on your real future." I got into State University with a decent GPA, not stellar, but enough to keep the peace. I enrolled as a business major, which felt both ironic and suffocating. I was studying supply chains and marketing funnels from outdated textbooks, while outside the classroom, I was living them in real time. To cover tuition, I took a part-time job at a boutique that sold women's accessories. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something more valuable than any lecture: insight into real customer behavior. I noticed how women struggled to choose clothing online, frustrated by misleading images and sizing confusion. And then, lightning struck. What if there was a platform where real women, not airbrushed models, showed how clothes actually fit? What if customers could input their measurements and instantly see what an item looked like on someone with their shape? That idea took over my mind. I sketched it on napkins during breaks. I stayed up late watching tutorials on basic coding and UI design. My grades? They suffered, but my vision? It came alive. Halfway through junior year, I knew I had a choice to make: stay and sleepwalk through 2 more years of a degree I didn't want, or take a leap into the unknown. I chose the leap. I still remember the night I told my parents. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my science fair projects and SAT flashcards had once lived. I explained my idea, my plan, my research. I told them I was dropping out. My father's expression never changed. "Absolutely not," he said, his voice low and cold. "No daughter of mine is throwing away her future on some internet fantasy." My mother started to cry. "You're so close, Olivia, don't ruin your life." But in that moment, I wasn't afraid of failure. I was afraid of regret. The next morning, I officially withdrew from the university. The refund check for unused tuition? That became my seed capital. I moved into a tiny studio apartment, one room that doubled as bedroom, office, and photo studio. The futon folded up to make space for a desk. The kitchen was barely big enough for a coffee maker. But I'd never felt more free. I named the platform Try Before, because that's what it was. A chance for shoppers to try before they buy, digitally, honestly, and without the filter of unrealistic beauty standards. The early days were brutal. I coded until my eyes burned, begged local boutiques to let me photograph their clothes on volunteers, and lived on microwaved noodles and stubborn hope. But something about the idea clicked. This wasn't a hobby, it was a solution. And soon, the world would begin to take notice. My studio apartment in downtown Cedar Falls became more than just a place to sleep. It was the nerve center of a dream I was willing to bet everything on. By day, I built the first prototype of Try before using free coding tutorials. Sheer willpower, and a laptop that ran hotter than a toaster. By night, I emailed every boutique in a 50-mile radius, offering them free publicity if they'd let me photograph their inventory on real women with different body types. Most ignored me, a few laughed, but 3 said yes. That was enough. I recruited volunteers through Facebook groups and college dorm bulletin boards. Anyone willing to be photographed in clothes and share their measurements. No fancy lighting, no makeup artists, just honesty, diversity, and a belief that real bodies deserved real representation. We shot photos against a blank wall in my apartment. I'd edit them between ramen noodle breaks, squinting through fatigue and pushing past imposter syndrome. I wasn't a model, a developer, or a CEO, not yet. I was just a girl chasing a vision everyone else had dismissed. 3 months in, I launched the site. At first, nothing. Crickets. A handful of visitors, most of them probably my own clicks. Then, on day 3, it happened, the first real order. A woman from Kansas bought a floral wrap dress after seeing it modeled by someone who looked like her. I nearly cried when the notification pinged. That sale wasn't just $49.99. It was validation. And soon, 1 became 5, then 10. By the end of month 6, Try Before was processing over 50 orders a day. I worked 18-hour days, surviving on caffeine, adrenaline, and every ounce of grit I had. The customer messages started coming in. Thank you. For the first time, I feel seen when I shop. I finally bought a dress that fits right the first time. Each one fueled me like oxygen. Every return customer felt like a silent nod from the universe. You're onto something. Olivia, don't stop now. With revenue steadily climbing, I knew I couldn't do this alone anymore. I posted an ad for a part-time assistant photographer, offering barely enough to cover gas and lunch. One applicant stood out, Rachel Kim, a recent art school grad with an eye for color and a heart as scrappy as mine. Rachel became my first hire. She brought energy, taste, and, most importantly, belief in the mission. She wasn't just taking pictures. She was capturing confidence, one photo at a time. We worked elbow to elbow, often quite literally, in that shoebox apartment. When the AC broke in July, we edited photos with ice packs on our necks. When my Wi-Fi crashed, we used Rachel's hotspot. When our models canceled, we stepped in front of the camera ourselves. We laughed, cried, and built something out of nothing. And still, my parents didn't ask a single question about how the business was going. They assumed I'd get bored, fail, and come crawling back to finish school, tail between my legs. But I wasn't failing, I was building. 1 year after dropping out of college, Try Before wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Rachel and I had finally moved out of my cramped apartment and into a real office space, a small, sunlit loft above a computer repair shop. It had creaky floors, one shared bathroom, and windows that rattled in the wind. But to us, it was everything. More importantly, the company was profitable. That's practically unheard of for a startup at the 1-year mark. But through careful spending, authentic growth, and pure sweat equity, we'd done it. That's when I thought, maybe now they'll see it. I invited my parents to visit the office. I cleaned every corner, straightened the chairs, prepped a short slide deck of our sales numbers. Rachel even brought fresh flowers. I wanted them to see what I had built, not just the business, but the vision, the courage, the reality of it all. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon. My mom, Margaret, stepped inside, looked around politely, and said, "Well, it's bright." My dad, Harold, walked slowly through the room, hands in his pockets, nodding like he was inspecting a second-hand car. When I showed them the numbers, real profit, consistent growth, hundreds of customers, he gave a single shrug. "How long do you think that'll last?" he asked. I mean, it's good now. But is this really something you can rely on? I opened my mouth to answer. But he kept going. You know, it's not too late to finish your degree. You could take night classes. Have something to fall back on. There it was, the fallback plan. As if the company I'd built, the jobs I'd created, the community I'd grown, none of it counted unless it came with a diploma. I stood there, smiling tightly, as my chest burned with disappointment. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was angry. I was used to the criticism by now, but because I'd really believed. Deep down, that showing them the office, the numbers, the team, might finally be enough. But it wasn't, not compared to my cousin Jessica, who had just gotten into medical school, not compared to the checklist version of success they'd written for me before I ever had a say in it. The next morning, I wrote something on a sticky note and placed it on my bathroom mirror. Your worth isn't determined by their recognition. I looked at it every day after that, a quiet promise to myself. Because whether or not they ever saw it, I knew I was building something real. And I was just getting started. By year 3, Try Before was no longer a startup, it was a full-fledged company. We moved into a larger office downtown, hired a team of 20, and introduced virtual try-on technology that helped women across the country shop with confidence. We even launched versions of the platform in Canada, the UK, and Australia. Revenue passed the $8 million mark. Profit margins were healthy. The press started calling. First, it was local business journals. Then fashion bloggers. Then, a Fast Company feature naming me one of the top female founders to watch. We won an award for Best Customer Shopping Experience from the Webby Awards. When CNBC aired a short documentary on self-made entrepreneurs. And I appeared on camera explaining how we built Try Before from a studio apartment. I sent the link to my parents. They never responded. Instead, during family gatherings, my father still introduced me as my daughter who didn't finish college. Not my daughter who runs a multi-million-dollar tech company. My mother would pivot the conversation to my cousin Jessica's med school rotation or my brother Mark's engineering internship. It was like I was still the black sheep, only now I was a black sheep footing the bill. Because I didn't stop giving, even when the recognition never came. When my dad lost his job at 58 due to corporate downsizing, I paid off their remaining mortgage, $16,700, so they wouldn't lose the house. When my mom began suffering from debilitating migraines and needed treatment their insurance didn't fully cover, I paid for it. When Mark got accepted to a private university, I paid his tuition, no questions asked. When my sister Emma got married, I wrote a check that gave her the wedding of her dreams. I paid for the catering, the photographer, even her dress. Still, no thank you ever felt complete. No gesture seemed to shift the way they viewed me. At Sunday dinners, my father would occasionally mention my business, always in passing, always with a slight air of detachment. Well, Olivia's online thing is doing okay, for now. Or worse, she got lucky. Right idea, right time, not like something real, like a degree. I'd sit there, stunned silent. Was the mortgage not real? Were the hospital bills I covered not real? Was the college tuition I paid not real? At one gathering, after my father referred to me as lucky for the 10th time, I quietly left the room and went to the bathroom. I locked the door and stared at my reflection. My hands trembled, not with sadness, but with the slow, simmering rage of years of being invisible in plain sight. That night, I drove home and stared at the sticky note still on my bathroom mirror. Your worth isn't determined by their recognition. I read it out loud this time, not as a reminder, but as a declaration. Because deep down, I was beginning to understand something. Their inability to acknowledge my success had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with the box they needed me to stay inside. A box where success looked like a framed diploma, not a growing payroll, where stability meant a pension, not millions in revenue, where being good enough meant being obedient, not being bold. And since I had broken that box, they'd never see me clearly. But I wasn't going to keep shrinking just to fit back inside it. 1 year after I walked out of my parents' house on Thanksgiving night, I stood on the deck of my Florida beach home, Watching the waves crash gently against the shore, the silence no longer felt lonely, it felt like peace. I had spent years trying to earn love that was conditional, respect that was withheld, and approval that never came. I gave my family money, support, and stability, but the one thing I truly needed, they could never give me: validation. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes, you don't need others to believe in you. You need to believe in yourself enough to walk away. It's not easy, especially when it's family, especially when you're raised to think love means sacrifice, even at the cost of your self-worth. But I promise you this: when you stop chasing their approval, you make space for your own voice to rise. And that voice, steady, clear, and powerful, is the beginning of true freedom. Blank_blank. Speech balloon. Has your success ever been dismissed by people you love? Have you had to choose yourself over their expectations? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. Bellhop Bell. Subscribe to Family Revenge for more true stories of transformation, healing, and hard-won freedom. Thumbs up like this video if it made you feel seen. Sent mail. Share it with someone who's been quietly carrying the same pain. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.